For this episode in the Simplicity series that I've put together, I've basically always showed pattern papers because, again, those pattern papers can do the work for us and will allow us to create all of the cards that we would ever need for any occasion, especially if we use specific paper pads. So, for instance, if we use obviously a Christmas print, then those would definitely be for the holidays. There's summertime prints and floral prints and everything else that could be brought in to other occasions. What I want to focus on today is our solid cardstock. When it comes to our solid cardstock, it can also do the work for us as well. We would just need to cut it. We can create layers and do different things with our cardstock. What the key is when it comes to our solids is the way that we would cut it. Now, I'm going to be using a paper trimmer because that's easier for me. But if you don't have one, you can use a ruler, a pencil, scissors to create the shapes. Now, the shapes that I'm going to focus on are squares, rectangles, and of course, because that's easier in a trimmer. So what you really need to know is what your measurements are going to be. And that's key. And then when you have your first main measurement, you would just cut smaller from there. So here, what I'm speaking of, let me grab something here. Okay. So these are panels, not that one. These are panels that are cut to be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. This is a standard A2 size base, design base. I usually, 9 out of 10, work on a design base because then I can take that and put that to my standard A2 size card base. Or I can take it to a 5 by 7 or a 6 by 6 or a 7 by 7. So this here is kind of like the palette of what I create on. Now there's times when I do want to put this onto my card base. My card bases are always white. I very rarely use a colored card base. So by using that white, and if I trim this down to a 4 by 5 1/4, I'm cutting off 1/4 of an inch from each side. So 1/4 of an inch here and 1/4 of an inch here, which would then allow for this small white border. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So I am going to work on these types of panels. I'm going to cut these down to be 4 by 5 1/4. That's going to be my base. Then I'm going to show you different ways that you can create your cards, whether you're creating strips, whether you're creating squares, or if you're creating rectangles, and what those cards could look like, but breaking down the size of your panels. So hopefully this will make more sense as we continue through. So I'm just going to get these ready. We're going to make, probably 5, maybe 7 different cards. So I'm going to make sure that I have that number, at least 7. And I'm going to trim these bases down based on the designs that we are looking at. So I'll be right back. Okay, so we're going to start with a very basic block system here. So again, this panel here is cut to be 4 by 5 1/4. So again, it's 1/4 of an inch from each side. And again, this is our design base. So I'm going to set that aside. So knowing that this piece is that, and I'm going to grab a sticky and a Sharpie, and I'm going to write that down. So 4 inches by 5 1/4 inch. And I'm going to put that right there. The next piece that I'm going to cut, I want a small border around this. Now, you want to decide what border you want. And what I mean by that is if you want a 1/8 of an inch border all the way around, which means the white will show, then you're going to drop your cuts by 1/4 of an inch. Whenever you cut 1/4 of an inch from each side, you're actually taking 1/8 of an inch from each side. Okay, so you take what you're cutting off, so that 1/4 of an inch, if you divide that by 2, it's 1/8. Now, you can go into different measurements, but I'm going to stick with the 1/4 of an inch increments, or 1/2 inch. So it's going to be even. I'm not going to get into eighths. I think the only one we'll talk about is the 1/8, because that's if we cut off the 1/4, that's what we're going to have on each side. So it always depends on how much of the color underneath you want to see. That's what you're actually thinking about when you're bringing down these different levels. So I know I want my next panel, I'm going to take it down 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to pull in the next one. I'm going to draw an arrow down. So now I'm going to cut a piece of cardstock 3 3/4 by 5. And I apologize, my handwriting's horrible. So, and I'm going to do that with my brown here. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to cut 3 3/4. If I can measure it up there. Save this. And then I'm going to turn this and I'm going to cut it at 5. So I'm going to go along that line. And I'm going to save this one too. So here is our panel, 3 3/4 by 5. So when I lay this down, you can now see a slight, even white border going around that. For my next level, now I'm going to take this and I'm going to move this here, and I'm going to put that one here, and I'm going to put that one there, and I'll even label this one 1, and I'll even label this one 2. Okay, so now for our third layer, and we'll put a 3 there. I'm going to now come down 1/2 inch. So now I'm going to take 1/2 inch off the 3 3/4. So now I'm at 3 1/4, and I'm going to come 1/2 inch off of the 5. That's going to be 4 1/2. So that's what my next panel is going to be cut at. So I'm going to grab my next cardstock, and I'm going to cut it at 3 1/4. And then I'm going to turn it and I'm going to cut it at 4 1/2. I'm using this paper trimmer because it's quiet. Would I normally use this? No. And we'll go up. I like this, but the blades, for me, the blades go very quickly. And when they do, I get fuzzies and bumps and all of that stuff. These are great trimmers. But I'm just using it because, again, it's quiet. So when I take this one and place that down, we see a little bit more of the brown or of the beige color that I have there. So we have the difference in the borders. I'm going to put one more layer. So here I am. I'm going to mark this one number 4. And for this one, I'm going to come down another 1/4. So I'm going to cut my next piece at 3. by 4 1/4, because 4 1/2 to 4 1/4 takes away that quarter. So here's the next piece of cardstock I want to use. Again, I'm going to cut this at 3. And next cut is 4 1/4. I'm going to take this, and now I'm going to set that back up. And this is our first card. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just let that sit there. If you want to zoom in on it, if you want to take a picture, if you want to freeze it, you can, so that you can see that is how this one is created. Now, let's get our layers together. So I like to take, after I've built it, I take them and I flip them. So this stays up and that goes down. I'm just going to grab a tape runner here because I'm trying to go through all the extra ones that I have here. Here we go. I'm going to put some tape. Oh my goodness. Are you kidding me? I'm going to slide that up. Okay. Yeah, me and tape runners just do not get along here. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong. Okay, we're going to put the tape runner away. And we're going to pull in my ATG because that's what I like. All right, I'm going to take that and I'm going to set that one down first, making sure I'm in the center. Again, we never go for perfection here. I'm going to grab my next layer. I'm going to put my tape down. Now you can certainly use liquid adhesive as well, whatever you prefer and what is in your stash. And I'm going to set that one down in the center. And we're going to do the same thing with the next one. This idea is great to make card sets, which would make great gifts if you want to make a note card set for a friend. And again, these are perfect to just make them up and then add your sentiments based on what you need for the occasion. Again, it's all about the colors. All about the colors that you can use. And here's our first one. We can put a nice little tiny sentiment down here, and that's all we need for that panel. So again, I'm going to keep that there so that you can get these dimensions. You can freeze it, take a photo, and we're going to move on to our next one. All right, card number 2. We're going to start now. This is the basic with the card that I made before. Now you can make these smaller, but remember, get your large base first and then work down. Now you can work the opposite as well. I like to work larger first, then work down to make sure that it's going to fit on the design panel that I'm using for my card. We're going to start now getting into different shapes and movements and everything else for the next 4 cards. So here I have my panel. This is cut 4 inches by 5 1/4. It's what we're going to start out with. I'll let you know if this changes. All right. And what I'm first going to cut is I'm going to cut 3 strips, 1 1/2 by 4. Okay. So let's do, I'm going to use these colors here. Okay, so let's move this here. We'll put this here. So again, we are going to look, I'm going to make my first cut at 4. Try to get the most of my paper when I make my cuts. And now I'm going to cut 3 strips at 1 1/2. So that's 1, 2, Okay, so we're going to put one here. And again, we're going to eyeball this to see what this is going to look at and what type of borders I'm going to put on the edges of the top and the bottom, because we've cut these to be the exact size of our width. And I like that. So this is what we have so far. For my next color, I want to go down 1/4 of an inch. So this one is going to be cut 1 1/4 by 3 3/4. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to grab our cardstock. We're going to cut it 3 3/4. And then 3 strips at 1 1/4. By layering your cardstock, you will get some wonderful texture and dimension as you continue to build up your blocks. And again, you can use any weight of cardstock that you would want. So you can see, if I put that there, I've got a 1/8 inch border going all the way around. For my next cut, I'm again going to come down 1/4 of an inch. So now we are at 1 inch by 3 1/2. So we're going to make this, find the straight edge because I'm digging into my stash. So 3 1/2 by 1. I'm actually measuring on this side so that I can make sure that it's staying straight. And again, we're going to have the same border going around our pieces. Now, for our final, and I called it the extra because you don't have to. You can leave it like this, and this is absolutely fine. For this one, I'm going to cut this 1/2 inch. I'm going to go down 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to keep it the same width. All right, so I'm only taking off the one side of this. And for that one, I'm going to come in with a nice gray. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come in on this side. There we go. So I have a nice 1/2 inch strip, and I'm just going to cut one more. Now the reason why I'm measuring on this side is so I can keep my hand on the cardstock on this side. Now I'm going to come in and cut my strips to be 3 1/2. And then we just need one more. I'm going to save that. So now when I put this strip in here, I only have the border going on the top and the bottom of each of those sections. So this would be great if you do have sentiment stamps to put a sentiment in each one of these. So let's put our cardstock together. So again, I'm going to take my layers, flip them over, I'll keep this here so you can continue to see it. And we are going to start putting our cardstock on. Now I'm going to grab, this time, some liquid glue, because then it won't come up into my camera. And remember, with liquid glue, a little goes a long way. You don't need a lot. When I'm putting pieces on like this, I like to start at the bottom and the top. And now I'm going to take it and I'm going to flip this, grab my next one, put that one into place. And then I'm going to grab my final one and just set that one right in between each of these. And again, I do like to, even though I work on a grid mat, yeah, I still eyeball it. Because again, have fun with it. Have fun with what it looks like. Now that we have these pieces in place, now we can just have fun putting our pieces in place, and we can continue to work each block individually. We don't have to, I mean, again, you can put them in together any way you want, but we can actually build each of our pieces all at once. And then I'm just going to line that side up, let this side fall. And because we're using liquid adhesive, we have some wiggle room, which is nice. And I'm just going to flip this over so that I can have this down near me. And again, we're just going to continue to place our pieces. What I want you to see is that solid cardstock, we don't have to use it just for mats. We don't have to use it just for our card bases, but we can, I almost put that in the wrong spot. You all saw that, right? That we can create designs with our solid cardstock. So even though it doesn't have a pattern, it does not mean that it can't do the work for you. If you're one that also keeps all of your scraps, then this is perfect for you as well, especially as we get into the other designs that I am about to show, because we're going to get into some nice small pieces to cut. And there you go. We now have this panel. And again, it would be fun to put a sentiment in each one of those blocks, but again, we can build our design. Now this can also go this way. You can put something going across. Okay, so that's card number 2. Again, I'm going to keep this here. Just keep the screen there for a little bit so that you can freeze it, take a picture of it, or just write down the sizes. All right, here we go, card number 3. So, again, 4 by 5 1/4. Now, what I've done with this panel here, knowing that these are the dimensions, I've created quadrants. That's what I'm measuring. So each quadrant is going to be 2 inches by 2. I'm thinking here. Now see how easy you can get. Oh no, this is also cut. This is actually cut 4 by 5. My bad. My bad. Sorry. Don't hate me. So 4 by 5 inches. Okay. So dividing that up in quadrants, again, I like easy math. Love math, but make it easy for me so that I don't need a calculator. So half of 4 is 2, half of 5 is 2.5. And that's how we're going to get our 4 quadrants. So I'm going to start by cutting our different shapes. So I need 2, what does this measure? So I'm going to take a 1/2 inch off this. Because that's 2.5, and now I need 2 panels at 2. Okay, so I have these 2. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a design. So I'm going to put those on an angle. I'm going to now grab my darkest shade, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut a strip at 2 inches. And then cut 2 at 2.5. And I am going to set those there. So it's like a puzzle. And I love puzzles, especially when I'm die cutting. You gotta love the puzzles. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the reverse on the colors. So for this one, I'm going to stick with 1/4 inches because we're using 4 shades going on here. So this one is actually going to be 1 3/4 by 2 1/4. All right, so I'm going to cut my next darkest. So I'm going to cut this at 2 1/4. And I'm going to save all of my larger pieces over here because I might be able to use those because of the way that I'm creating this. And then 1 3/4. It's 1, and let's say, of course not. But I can use this one. 2 1/4. So I do like to keep my scraps off to the side because there might be that size that I can use. So I'm going to set those there, and I'm going to set that there. To do these, I'm going to grab my other shade, and I'm going to cut this at 2 1/4. And I need 1 3/4 again. I like to have fun with colors and creating your own designs. That is what the beauty is when it comes to our solid colors. Our next level is going to be 1 1/2 by 2. So I need this one, and this measures 2 1/4. So I'm just going to show, yeah, okay, we're going to do that. Cut that at 2. And then we're going to cut our 1 1/2 blocks. Again, get the most out of your paper. And I'm going to put that there. And I'm going to put that there. And now I'm going to go back to this one. This shade here. No, right there. That's it. And let's see. This is only 1 1/2. So I'm going to set that one aside. And I'm going to come in. And I'm now going to cut a strip at 2. and 1.5, and I just need 2 of those. All right, we're going to put those down. Now I'm going to go back to my dark because we're going to write this one down. So this is going to be 1 1/4 by 1 3/4. So you can see here we're dropping down 1/4 of an inch. Here we're dropping down 1/4 of an inch. And this might be something that helps you to create your stickers, or have a little notepad next to you. I always have a notepad next to me, a scratch pad, and I just write my notes down so that I don't forget. Okay, so this measures 2. So I am going to cut this at 1 3/4. And I need 2 at 1 1/4. Oops. And we are going to put that there. And now we need the lightest, so I'll go into this and cut this. One 3/4 by 1 1/4. And we're going to put that there and there. All right, let me get this out of my way. Going to set these aside. I have a little pile over there. Carefully pick this up and put this on this side. All right, so now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to glue our pieces down. Now again, I like to take them after I have it built and flip them upside down. I'm going to grab my glue and I'm going to start with all 4 large mats first. And I'm going to put this down, line up my corners, and now I'm going to go to my next one that's right next to that. I do not cut perfect. But what I'm going to make sure is that my center points are right in place. I'm not worried about the sides. I start lining up here, but I want these to be straight in the center. So now I'm going to go to my next one, and I'm going to flip this. And I'm going to butt it right up against that one that I have there. And then I'm going to come in. I just shifted that. Oh my goodness. And now I'm going to come in with the one next to it. And I'm just going to push right into that corner. I like to use my nail and just push on those corners. And now we have our base. And yes, we have a side here, but that's okay. We are going to fix that. And we have a little bit on the top. Now we can just have fun putting our designs together. So I'm going to start here. I'm looking at my colored paper only, making sure that I've got an even border going around each block, because we only dropped 1/4 of an inch. That's our first one. These types of designs are great if you get one of those value packs, I love those value packs. I think those packs are great. Now, they may not have the color choices that you see that I have here, the gradients. Now, I get my cardstocks when I'm looking for those for layering on some of the things that I do. From Michaels, I do like their paper. It's 65-pound weight. When it comes to their packs that are gradient, and they have some beautiful colors in there, and that is the cardstock that I use for all my mats. Whenever I'm matting, whenever I'm creating videos for the Simplicity series, that is the cardstock that I am using. I may pull, you know, a one from, you know, another company that might be a little bit thicker, but generally that is the cardstock that I'm using. So if there are specific colors that you like, then you can be specific with your color choices. Now, as you're putting this together, this will play tricks on your eyes. Just what I do is I keep focusing on the point to just make sure, because we've changed this, it looks like it's crooked as I'm looking at this, but I don't believe it is. And if it was, it's okay. So now I'm going to put that there. And there we go. We have a great looking geometric, and I messed something up. What did I mess up? Okay, guys, can you see it? I see where I messed up. And yes, we are going to pull this up. You all were screaming in the camera, weren't you? I know you were. So what I'm doing is I'm gingerly, but I'm pulling all of them up at once. You do not want to pull each one individually. Keep all of them together. Don't worry about what this is going to look underneath, because it's going to look bad. Very bad. Now I'm going to come in with a pair of scissors and cut that. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Again, by pulling all three up, I'm getting more stability in the cut. When I come to this side, I'm going to take my scissors or my nail to make sure I'm not ripping any of that side cardstock up. I'm not worried about anything underneath it. So you're seeing that I'm turning this. Now, some say you can use a heat gun for this, but maybe you don't have one. That's why I'm not using it. We use what we have. And again, you can see I'm taking that scissors and I'm pushing up underneath this panel. And now I'm going to do that over here. Once I know that I've got my sides clear, like now I'm just going to pick her right up, lift it up, and then I'm going to come in with my scissors and trim her, because I didn't want to rip above that. I'm going to flatten these out. See, they're not damaged. See? I'm going to flatten them out. I'm going to add more glue, and I'm really going to add just a little bit of extra glue because I've got some, you know, angles going on here. Now let's see if I can put this in the right spot. We're going to put this here. Yes. Again, just lining that up. I'm going to lift this up just a little bit. Yep. I'm going to push that other color that was sitting there. See, nails are your great tool, or pointy scissors. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So it is funny, as you're putting it together, your eyes will go a little bit, it's almost like an illusion that you're creating. And once I was done, that is when I saw the boo-boo that I did. happy accident, because now you all got to see how is she going to fix this. And again, my nail is just coming in with these little straggle pieces that are sticking out. And there we go. Now that looks right. We can always save our cards. Always. Don't think you can't. And now I'm going to bring in my big scissors, my long shears, and I'm going to cut right up alongside these panels, keeping my scissors at an angle and just going up that line. And I'm going to do the same thing on this one. Again, just angling my scissors to the right and cutting along that edge. And we got a great card, and nobody would know that we had to rip this little puppy apart. Yay! So again, going to do the same thing. Going to set that down. You can see the sizes, and then that is just going to be for one of these blocks. Okay, our fourth card. Let's see how we do with this one. Okay, I've already written out what my measurements are. Instead of going with 1/4 of an inch, I'm going with 1/2 inch. That's 1/4 of an inch times 2. And I already have them mapped out. This piece here does measure 4 by 5 1/4, and I've just confirmed that. I'm going to set this aside, and let's get some bolder colors here. Here we go. Okay. Now where's that? There we go. And what we're going to do is we are going to create 3 squares. I am going to start with, and we're not inverting the colors. Yeah. I'm going to start with my darkest color. I want that one to be my largest matte. And again, we're going to cut 3 of them. Now, you can make your squares any size that you would want. Have fun with the different shapes. When it comes to your creations, have fun with the colors. Think on how these would be if they were rainbows. How pretty. Now I'm going to cut 2.5 by 2.5 inch blocks with the next color. Again, going to my scraps first. And you can see this time I'm just throwing them down on top of my design panel. What I do like to do is to, know what my design is going to be, and then make all of my cuts. I like to change my mind. I always change my mind. Okay, but if I want to set the arrangement a little bit differently, if I want to add in another color, I can. You can also, if you do it this way, you're able to make your cuts in a production style. Meaning, do all of your cuts. You know you need this number of this. You know you need this number of this. So you can do this process in a production style line. So if you want to make multiple gifts with this idea, you certainly can. Now going to take this pile, and I'm going to move my scraps, and I'm just going to separate the colors, because I know this is my base. I know this is my next color. I'm going to set that in place. Now we have a bigger border this time. And I know this is my next color. I find doing this as well can help you with color choices. I've always said that one of the biggest questions I get is, how do I know what colors go together? And you know, it's actually tough for me to answer that, because my eyes will tell me if a color looks good or not, especially when I'm pulling them individually from, you know, my stash. Okay, if I'm pulling from a kit, I know all those colors go together. Because again, kit's designed that way. The best way that I always answer that color or that question is keep your cools together and keep your warms together. For me, that's how I can look at that and how I choose my colors. Now, you can also separate. The best way that you can do is, let's know our rainbow. Roy G. Biv. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, or purple. If you keep the red, orange, and the yellow are warm, the green, blue, and purple are cool. Gray can go on the cool side. Now, you'll know if it's a warm gray, because then you're going to push it over there. You're just going to see it. Browns go on to the warm side. That's how I break down the colors very quickly in my mind. Just very quick. Okay, back to the card. And I'll get back to the colors. So here we go. Here's our square. These are our measurements. And now we're going to put our square together. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to set it up into that corner. And I'm just going to match it up. And I'll press down. Now I'm going to take this one and lay that over. This is why I love the Recollection 65 pound. Because even though I have all of these layers, I'm not getting a huge amount of bulk underneath. It's not going to go wonky. It's not going to go weird. All right. Now we have our last one. Now this one we can take this way. Your sentiment can go right on top of here. Again, have fun with your colors. Now this, I am actually going to center this, and I'm looking at this corner here, and I'm looking at this corner up here, and I'm just making sure that they're even. And because of my dimensions, I know this needs to touch this line and this needs to touch this line. And I'm going to press down. I'm going to turn this over and I'm just going to trim off the edges. And there's our fourth card. We've got a great looking design. Now you can always change your background. Picture this if this was black or gold, or any color that would match this. Absolutely. Okay, so again, I'm going to let that there. Take your picture. Okay, last and final card. We're going to do something that's a little bit more, we could call it annoying, but it will really go through your scraps. Now this here is cut 4 inches by 4 inches. That is our design base. And what I did was I divided it into 1-inch sections. So you would have 4 and 4. If we take 4 times 4, we will get 16 squares. for a 4x4 square. Now what I mean is use your scraps. For this, I'm kind of creating a checkerboard. So you would only need a 4x2 inch piece to get 8 squares. And that's what these are here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take these, again, matching up into the corner. And then I'm going to take a gray square. Again, just matching up alongside of that and sticking with the line, looking at this edge to make sure that it's straight. We're going to come in with a shade of brown, and then a shade of gray. All right, and I'm going to continue through this to build this up. So now that I've started with the brown, I'm going to, of course, come down with the gray. So again, you are able to create a 4x4 panel using a 2" by 4" piece of scrap cardstock. Doing these with your solid cardstock may be the greatest way, or a fun way, for you to, one, use up your scraps, because we always have trouble throwing them away. But you can create your own designs. And again, these can be backgrounds. We don't always have to create a background using watercolors or sprays or anything like that. You can use your cardstock. You've seen me before. Strips. I love making strips. I absolutely love making strips on cardstock. And again, now for the base for that, I always use my copying paper. But again, that's what's really good when it comes to the Recollections 65-pound. Doing strips with a thicker cardstock, yes, you can, but it can get really bulky depending upon how you're doing it. That's why I do enjoy the 65-pound weight for these types of designs, so that when you layer like we did with our 3" square, it's not going to wiggle. It's not going to create these bumps going across. And you don't have to use double-sided foam squares if you don't have them. So that's what's awesome about it. But that doesn't mean that you cannot use your thicker cardstock. I cannot stress that enough. All right, now, you're always going to have something, excuse me, oh my goodness, that's going to go off a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait. I want to layer these up first. This edge, though, I am going to trim because, and again, keeping those scissors at an angle, going to on the right, leaning towards the right because I'm right-handed. I just want to get rid of that white edge. Okay, now for the rest of them, it's all the same color. So now I'm actually just going to put a square down on that. I'm going to pick up my blue. While the first layer was 1 inch, these are 3 3/4. So to get 16 blocks from one color, you would need a 3.5 inch by 3.5 inch square piece of scrap. I think that's awesome. And now I'm just going to go. So you could have a lot of fun in creating all types of backgrounds. I truly am in the world of use what you have. YouTube does provide a challenge because there's so many different techniques out there. It can certainly be overwhelming when it comes to, you know, the paper crafting world. But there is so much that you can do with paper. So you can see it's taking on a different look. Now, what I also want you to notice too is I have both a cool and a warm color on here. And I am coming across with a cool color because that's the blue. But again, because you're creating that pattern, that is what's blocking the eye from saying, okay, that just doesn't look right. That just, what you're actually creating with some of these designs, especially this one, it looks like an optical illusion. Because as I'm looking at this, and again, it happens when you look at it somewhat on an angle, these blocks that I'm putting in look like they're going in crooked. Now, some of them could be, don't get me wrong. You know, I've been known to do that a lot. I don't like to measure. I don't like to, you know, there's a lot of things that just don't look right to me. Sometimes that makes people happy, sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't matter to me. But they do. They look like they're dancing, or when you stare at excuse me, stare at it long enough, these blocks will start looking like they're moving. I love optical illusions. I think they're a lot of fun. So that's kind of what you're creating. So now we have this one. And now we're going to do our next one. These squares are cut a ½ inch. So for this color, you would just need a 2-inch square piece. That's all. That is all of what you would need. Okay, I'm just going to put circles down here because I'm going to get glue all over myself if I don't, and I don't want to do that. Again, just making sure my squares are centered, and I'm looking at each square individually, trying to keep my eyes focused in on that. All right, next group. Now, if you've got sequins, you can put sequins in the center of these. I mean, you can just have a lot of fun with it. But again, it's all paper, whether it's pattern paper or whether it's solid. The paper can do the work for you. You just need to cut it. Oh, now see, that one I know is crooked. And I do not worry. Again, I don't worry if the glue comes out because I can just swipe it with my finger. Whenever I'm done crafting, I've got glue. I got to soak them in like super hot water. But you can see just how all of these colors are coming together. This color that I'm putting on now is a very pale peach. So peach is one of those colors that it does fall into the warm family. So that's what's working with the brown. The blue, I saw that was crooked. I heard yous. The blue is focusing in on the gray. Now, blue and gray do go very well together. But your neutrals, your blacks, your grays, your browns, they will conform, so to speak, to the colors that they are surrounding with. And there's our block. Now it looks like it's shifting. It looks like these aren't lined up, but if you look, it is. They are lined up. Now I'm going to turn this over because I do have some that are really, really sticking out. So I'm going to kind of change, unfortunately, well, just the one, because I'll cut along that. I just want to make sure I have a straight edge. There we go. All right, there you go. You can take that picture. But we've created an optical illusion, and that's what we've been doing. All right, so when I come back, we're going to see all of our cards and how they look onto a standard A2 size card base. Okay, and here are all the cards that we made today. All right, we started basic, creating those mats to be the rectangle based off of our design panel where we started. Beautiful colors can be used. If you have glitter cardstocks, if you have mirror cardstocks, by all means. But I wanted to focus on the fact that you can use just your colored, solid cardstock. Could you also do this in all white? Absolutely. And it would look absolutely gorgeous. So try to envision all of these, the texture that you would get if you just used white cardstock. Awesome. But here's our panel. Here's our standard A2 size card base, top folding. When I take this one here, we have a bigger white border, okay? But you can see each of those levels. That's what that would look like. For our next card panel, we created strips. We took the last layer and made it the same length as the layer before it. You can do that and have fun with it. This is what this panel would look like. Again, we have that white border back. On the sides, it's 1 inch, and on the top, it's 1.25 inches. Again, just creating that dimension, sentiment, beautiful in each one of those. For our next one, we had a big boo-boo because your instructor is just crazy that way. But we created an optical illusion again. Now here we have a white border going all the way around because of the way we designed this. This one looks like it's going down. This one looks like it's coming up. Or vice versa. Again, you can create your own optical illusions when it comes to your card bases. You can put a little tiny sentiment here, or better yet, when it comes to when you create that optical illusion, put it on the inside, because then you won't ruin that look. For this one here, we just got very geometric-y. All right, we can put our sentiment here. We created 2 squares, and then we turned one and made it a diamond. So we created this diamond or this square fall look. And again, have fun with your colors. This one here, this one is just a lot of fun. This would just sit there. I just love the way, as I'm seeing this in, excuse me, as I'm, allergies, it's an awesome time of the year for the States. As I look at this in my camera, as I'm filming this, it just looks like these things are just jetting out, and it looks like it's not lined up, it's not uniform, which I think is great. So, my question is, did you know that you can create optical illusions simply by using solid cardstock? I think it's a lot of fun. I hope I showed you another way to use what you have. Use that cardstock that we have. When it comes to cardstock and pattern paper, there's just an addiction there, by all means. But use that, and these are ways, and again, with some small pieces can be used so you can dig into your scraps. I just hope that you all enjoyed this. I hope I gave you a few more ideas when it comes to simplicity and what we can do with it and how we can work with it. Our papers can do everything for us. We are just the vessel to cut and put it together to create the art. And I think that's wonderful. If you haven't yet, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, because if you enjoyed this, maybe somebody else will. And that's the trigger for other people to be able to see this. Enjoy your day, enjoy your time in your creative space, but most of all, always remember, be creative. And I'll talk to you in the next one. Take care, guys.